All right, I guess we'll get started. How was everybody? Good? Did you guys have class this morning? Yeah? Is this your second class for today, or do you have more than that? None after this, right? No late ones? Okay, that's good. Yeah, so this is client-side scripting. So if you were expecting something else, then you're likely in the wrong class. Hopefully you're not. How many web classes have you had before this? Have you guys had PHP yet? Yeah? Intro to PHP, so you did just like the basic stuff, no MVC or anything yet? No? Okay. What about database stuff? You guys had SQL? Yeah? Cool, okay. And then you've had HTML with Scott? Did you have Scott? No? Who'd you guys have for your HTML teacher? Jessica. Gilfillan?
Did MVC with PHP.
And
Rich did MVC.
Rich did MVC with PHP?
No, Jessica.
Jessica did? Did she do Laravel?
No, but we just
Just built your own MVC straight from the ground up? Cool, that's awesome. We're not going to do any MVC. No React, no Angular, no Backbone, no Ember, or anything like that. This is a very basic client-side scripting class, and I can tell you from experience, it is important that it's basic because next semester, you will have advanced website, which will be Angular, Mongo, and Express, and Node. So in that class, you guys will do all of your MVC stuff. Now, that being said, imagine some of you already know JavaScript, dabbled in JavaScript or something like that. Depending on the pace of the class, I would like to get to something a little bit cooler towards the end of the semester, which would be Phaser. Phaser is like a 2D, you can kind of do 3D with it, I guess. 2D gaming engine, and we'll be able to build a game in the last 3 weeks, which will be pretty cool. If we get really going along, we'll actually learn P5.js, which is probably one of the most awesome libraries that are out there for doing any really cool game development and game engine work, as well as like a really complex math library in it as well. It's pretty cool. All right, but today we're going to do Intro to JavaScript, and obviously introduce myself as well. Let me pull out my slide deck. One thing I will tell you right off the bat, I hate making these things. So the two you get today will be the only two you ever get, okay? Because I don't like making them. I find them boring and I find them annoying to make. All right, I'm all about like the hands-on. Let's get into it. Let's just do stuff. So, yeah. All right. Introduction and expectations. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm not going to go around the room and do all that fun-loving crap. If you want to come up to me later and introduce yourself, go ahead. I'll warn you right now, I have the world's shittiest memory. It is extremely short term, like a goldfish. I am not going to remember who you are. It might take weeks before I remember you. However, I will say, just keep reminding me, because the more you stand out, obviously, the better it is to get networked and connected. I'm that guy. I'm that guy. I've been programming for about 17 years, actually give or take, because this slide deck's a bit old. Started with HTML, PHP, and CSS. I mean, who the fuck hasn't, right? I now know, however, C++, did in university, taught C++ last semester. So if you guys, how many of you are in the 3-year program? Yeah, you might get me for C++ if you decide to take it. JavaScript, including its various flavors, so jQuery, but come on, we have ES6 now. No reason to use jQuery, right? But anyways, I still know it. ES6, obviously. Dabbled in Node for server-side JavaScript, stuff like that. I work primarily in Rails at my day job. We do a lot of Ruby stuff. Right now we're building like a massive network marketing thing, which is pretty cool and stressful. Python, very loosely. I built like a plugin for Blender, and I've done like a couple of math things in university in Python, but that was about it. It's a good language, don't get me wrong. It's an awesome language. It's definitely better than that piece of crap at the bottom. But yeah, it's definitely better than that. Industry experience, I've worked at Georgian College for about 3 years now. You didn't have me last semester because I was in university. No, not last semester, the semester before you guys went on co-op. I was in university, I wanted to try to get my master's degree. That didn't go very well. I'm really crappy at math, terrible at math. And like trying to do math when you're almost 40 is like really, really hard. So I said screw it, came back. I worked at G Shift, which is here in Barrie. G-Shift does like big data collection. They basically scrape Google, bring back the content from Google, and then build like keyword reports and stuff for SEO. I worked on that platform. I now work at Fireside Agency, which is a web development agency, but we do anywhere from like small business to medium-sized business. Various freelance projects. I mean, you got to make some money for some groceries and stuff, right? And then I graduated the Georgian College WBAM program, which is the web design program that's here at Georgian. It's not called that anymore. I think it's interactive media or something like that. I can't remember. In university, we built a video game. I took game development, which is pretty fun. We built that thing, Dark Reach Origins. That was our logo. I've been programming for a really long time. Yeah.
I was going to ask if you are still doing C++ projects. Or...
Me? Just to teach it. Yeah, that's about it. That was all built in C++. Dark Reach Origins was built in C++. We had like a super like amazing C++ developer who built a game engine that had, I don't know how much you guys know about like 3D, but we had like normal mapping and we had physics-based rendering and stuff like that, which is pretty advanced for a game engine built from scratch. Like we didn't use Unreal, we didn't use Unity, no CryEngine. It was our own game engine. We called it Clueless. I didn't do much development in that though. I did mostly the graphics, so all the graphics you see there are all mine. Other than that, I guess we can move to expectations. I think I missed a slide there. Lost one. All right, expectations. I'm sure you guys have heard most of these. Be here, obviously. I'm going to record the videos. So every class I'll record. That being said, shit happens. Recordings get lost. I don't live stream to YouTube because it always glitches out with Georgian's crappy network. So I record using ScreenFlow, which is a software that's on my computer. And I get distracted and shut my computer and totally forget to save the recording. That happens often. For the most part, between this class or the next class, you will at least have one recording every week. No matter what, it just might not be your class. It might be the other class instead. But I do recommend it being here because it ensures that you have support, right? From me, from the people around the room. Hopefully you guys have started to know each other and become familiar with each other. From your in-class resources as well, right? Ensures you get your money's worth because you pay an assload of money to be here. Some of you more than others. If you're international students, you pay a lot of money to be here. So based on that, it's definitely worthwhile to be in class versus just watching me talk on YouTube. So class discussions are a strong part of learning, obviously. They provide insight into the topic because often when we start talking, even on break, actually that's when I notice the biggest discussions tend to happen is when we hit a break and I've hit pause, and that's when we get into like a really good topic and we start getting some meat and butter out of it. And that's the thing, I find all that gets lost because it doesn't actually get recorded and people miss out on those details. And then obviously class discussions provide a different point of view. How I code, how you code, how your neighbor codes, we're different. How we approach a problem or a challenge is different, right? So it's often cool to get a different point of view from other people. Be on time. That being said, I usually start class 2 minutes in. Gives you time to get here because Tim Hortons lineup is not always the best. So that gives you a little bit of time to get here. Show dedication. Obviously, that's arriving, being here, doing the stuff you need to do. Prove your worth, value to your colleagues and the industry. Like it says, class starts 2 minutes after the start time, provide an extra couple minutes for travel, and provides a buffer to settle in. There we go. Participate. I hate standing up here talking to myself. It is so boring. And when you get a bunch of people just staring at you and nobody provides feedback, it makes it really, really hard. So class goes a lot faster because it's 3 hours, right? Like we're sitting here for 3 hours. Class goes a lot faster when you participate and take part. Questions asked help. Questions asked, I think my grammar needs work. Questions asked help everyone to better understand. Obviously, if somebody asks a question, might be a question that somebody else has, but doesn't necessarily, they're not confident enough to say it out loud. I'm currently building something that might help with that. We'll talk about that later, though. Helps me learn and remember who you are. Like I said, I have a goldfish memory, so the more you participate, the more I'll start to learn who you are, remember your name, start to put the face to the name, that kind of thing. Proves your worth and value to your colleagues, that's always important. And think group activities, as there will be some for sure. That was more in the C++ and the mean stack class that we did a lot of group activity stuff. Almost everything we did was group. This class is not really oriented towards that. I haven't built out assignment 1 or 2 yet, but when I do, I'll think it out. Maybe we might do those as group activities. I don't know. How many of you hate groups? Like just hate group work, period? Wow, okay.
Time schedule.
Yeah, the time schedule. Usually the way I do it is if it's a group activity, based on the size of your group, increases the complexity of the marking. That's the way I do it. So if it's one dude, I'm not going to, penalize them nearly as bad as I would 3 people. All right, academic misconduct, this wonderful subject. This is unfortunately has been growing exponentially for the past 5 years. I know when I started with Georgian 3 years ago, I caught like 8 students cheating, reprimanded them, and then it was done. Didn't happen again that semester. Now supposedly people are like getting kicked out of college for it, which didn't happen when I was here, which is, wow. I can't imagine having to pay that money over again because you got booted out. But anyways, so there's several factors I find that cause cheating. Competitive nature of the industry. Like when I first started, there wasn't as many people in the industry, at least not solid talent. PHP developers were a dime a dozen, but they've always been. But people like, Ruby developers, JavaScript developers, they were harder to find. Now, everybody knows everything, it seems, right? Like, because there's so many frameworks. It's so easy to get out there and find work. Problem is obviously the pay scale is also declined. It's not nearly where it was, even 5 years ago. That being said, though, what the hell was I saying? That competitive nature leads to cheating because if you get out, then hopefully you can get a job, right? And you want to keep your grades up so that you look a little better than other people, I guess. The work-play divide attitude of the current society, I find, also affects it. We're more heading towards the European kind of style where we don't live to work. We're now trying to work to live, and that's it. And then take some free time to ourselves. Unfortunately, when you're in school, I find if you're in school, now's the time to bust your ass and get your stuff done and take very little time for free time and just more spend on the focus of school, right? Because then when you get out, you make the fat stacks and you can take all the free time you want, vacations, wherever, right? That's the real point. What else? So I'm always investigating strategies to mitigate cheating. I think I told you I was developing. We likely won't be doing our tests through Blackboard. We'll be doing our tests through a chunk of software that I'm building, and that will also help to mitigate against cheating. Group work, I find, also helps keep people honest. Various evaluation options avoid students working on the same assignment, stuff like that. I find with academic misconduct, the big things are be legit, just don't. Don't plagiarize, don't infringe copyright or trademark. That being said, if you took a picture off Google and stuck it in your assignment, I don't really care. I'm not going to flame you for it. But you steal your buddy's project and submit it, then we're going to have problems. I find it's embarrassing for me. I hate having to do that, talk to somebody about it. It's annoying. I really hate it. So it's embarrassing for me. It's definitely embarrassing for them. It's even different now, too, in the college because when we fill out the stupid academic misconduct form, other teachers get that form and they can see the academic misconduct. So they know. They already know whether or not you're a cheater or not, right? So what else? What isn't bad form? So bad form is submitting a colleague's solution as your own, obviously. Submitting an online solution like a Stack Overflow answer as your own. Having someone aid in building your complete solution. Hiring a Fiverr to do your solution for you. Haven't had that happen yet. Hopefully I'm not giving you any ideas. Not bad form. Using open source libraries to help with your solution, totally fine. I have no problem with that. You want to use jQuery, but don't use ES6. Use ES7, 8, whatever. jQuery's, you don't need it. Or if you want to use P5 or Phaser or any library that's out there, feel free. I'm totally cool with that. It challenges you as well, right? Sharing application flow UML diagrams with colleague. Have you guys done UMLs? A little bit? Either way, application flow diagrams is like, here's the challenge, here's how I would solve it in a diagram form, kind of like pseudocode. Handing that off to your colleague, that's totally cool. I have no problem with that, because they still need to know the language well enough to code it in. And then discussing how to solve a particular problem with a solution. I'm okay with that as well. All right. If you are unclear that what about to do is cheating or academic misconduct, please make sure you ask. Signs of academic misconduct, you know what, let's just blow through this. I'm sure you guys have done this a few times. This is important though. The way the penalties work is the first offense you receive an immediate 0 on whatever the submitted solution is. And there's like an academic misconduct form that goes in. The second offense you receive a 0 for the course, which means you'll have to pay to retake it again. Ask you to leave, you never come back, that kind of thing. It's embarrassing for everybody. And then the third offense is all of your courses wind up zeroed out and you get kicked out of the college, which is like the crappiest thing to happen. Obviously, the aftermath is pretty nasty. It's a permanent record added to your Georgian College academic file. Compounds against you in future offenses, which means if you cheat in this class and then attempt to cheat in Rich's class, for example, it counts as 2 strikes. It's costly, you know, tens of thousands depending on who you are and what you're taking and how much you had to pay to be here. Why I care if you cheat. Actually, let's go back to that slide. How many of you have actually, how many of you did programming co-ops when you were out? Yeah, okay. So our industry, I find, is oversaturated with programmers who don't have a clue what they're doing. They piece together code they find or steal, like Stack Overflow answers, and just build Stack Overflow answers to reach a solution. They build Frankenstein creations that never work properly. They create an insecure internet and industry, right? Like that big thing that happened where the guys hijacked the Wi-Fi off so many like toys and crap devices out there and build a big DDoS network. That was pretty smart, but it's because of shitty programmers, right? And they devalue our industry, right? Because the more oversaturated it is, the more problems where people get burned by these guys, the lower they're going to start pay, right? They're not going to pay people if they think everybody's just going to screw them over. You're working with sensitive data often. You know, I need to be sure that you're not going to be that person that's going to sell or steal or do something nasty with that data, that you won't open gaping holes to the sensitive data, and that you're not breaking in NDAs or industry regulations that can wind up leading to a lot of bad things, like being terminated, being sued, or even going to prison, depending on what it is. Obviously, we're not going to get to that point. Yeah. This is also online, so you're welcome to read this if you want to. In closing, don't be a dick. Really, that's all it boils down to. All right, due dates and submissions. More fun stuff. Due dates. I teach 2 classes a week. I also work 40 hours a week. Teaching 2 classes a week, I have to build course material. Now, we do kind of help each other out. But that being said, it takes about 18 hours a week to do course material, and then grading on top of that is about 10 minutes per assignment per student. I have 80 students altogether, so that makes up for almost no time to do very much. So when it comes to due dates and extensions, I have no problem offering an extension, providing you've actually made an attempt on whatever it is that you're working on. So when you ask me for an extension via email, you send me what you currently have. That's basically what it boils down to. And then I take a look at that and go, yeah, you're on the right track. You definitely need time. Sure. You give me the night before and request an extension, which happens so often. And you're going to get a no. Just clear and simple. I don't give grace periods based on I will give grace periods based on your class current progress, and I will not give grace periods to people who have made 0 progress. All right, submissions. Most of them will be to Blackboard or Dropbox, depending on the solution size. Not even necessarily Dropbox, cloud service. Whatever cloud service you have, you can send me your link. Hopefully, in a couple of weeks, we'll be using Git. How many of you have used Git? Good. That's awesome. How many need a refresh on Git? That's even better. That saves me a world of hurt. Okay, so we will start using Git almost immediately. All right,
Jared had most of
Oh, yeah, that's totally cool. I have no problem with that. I don't mind GitHub submissions. However, just a note, I've had people try this to me before. They put their stuff into GitHub, they send me their link, and then they make future commits after the due date. If you make future commits after the due date, I deduct future marks. That's the way it works. So don't make future commits on that submission. All right, multi-file submissions must be compressed, but if you guys are cool, I'd just rather use GitHub and avoid the whole multi-file situation altogether. Submission file label, yeah, if we're using Git, don't worry about any of that. If we do group work, though, that's the only time this is important. Each group member has to be in a README file, and you have to have their student name and who they are, so they get the credit that they need. Agenda for the average class. So we will review the last class learning outcome, usually in like a poll or something cool. Introduce the day's class topic, obviously. Lecture interactive demo, yeah, I'll never be lecture. It'll always be interactive demos. Then we'll break. Usually I give 15 minutes because we're so far at the other end of the building that you need time to get to Tim Hortons and back, right? And then we'll do another activity, another break, and then we'll do like a closing review. Communicating with me. Slack. Please join Slack. I know, you join tons of things. How many of you are part of Discord already, probably? I have considered switching from Slack over to Discord. The only reason why I use Slack is because you very likely will see it out in the industry when you start working in different jobs. A lot of people use Slack because it's considered like the professional communication tool. Though I have installed Giphy. And if you don't know what Giphy is, you can type /Giphy into Slack and then put up, just type in a word and it will find a GIF for it and put it up into the Slack window.
Tenor as default now.
What's that?
Tenor.
Tenor?
Yeah.
That's the new communication tool?
Tenor.
I haven't heard of it.
But Discord in its default.
Oh, okay. That's cool. Yeah, so Slack is one way. It's on my tablet, it's on my phone, it's on my computer, it's on my work computer. So you can definitely get a hold of me through Slack quickly. Plus, I get notified like a bajillion times. If you're going to send me an email, please make sure you make sure the subject is your name, the class day, and the subject. Because like I said, I have a goldfish memory. Don't expect me to remember who you are. Make sure I know who you are, right? So that I know who I'm dealing with and what the problem is, and hopefully I can put a name to a face. In the body, I need a summary of what's wrong, like what the issue is that you're having, what you've done to fix it, okay? And then usually it's really handy if you either give me a link to your GitHub account where you have the current state of your project, or you give me a zip of it so that I can run it and figure out what's wrong, okay? Course outline, cool. Got through that pretty quick. So these are all the course outline pieces. They're sitting in the course information folder. You can find them on there, including how to contact me. Course outline, just click the link. If you haven't had a chance to look at this, I recommend looking at it. Gives you an idea of everything we're going to be doing over the next 14 weeks. It also tells you a breakdown of some of the stuff, but the syllabus is definitely a little bit more informative. The syllabus tells you the meeting times. So we meet Tuesdays and Thursdays. You guys don't meet on Tuesdays, obviously. If you are going to miss a Thursday class and you want to make it up on the Tuesday, because right now the Tuesday is 1 week behind because of the orientation. So they're technically, this class will be repeated on Tuesday of this week. You can come to my Tuesday class to sit into that lecture. However, if you have plans to join the Tuesday class because you're finding the Thursday class too difficult to get to due to work or whatever prior commitment you might have, you need to talk to your coordinator, which is probably Ross. Yeah, you need to talk to Ross before the 17th of September, okay? I've had people try to switch after that. It's impossible. They will not allow them to switch. So just to note, if you want to come to the Tuesday one instead of the Thursday, you got to talk to Ross, okay? Before the 17th of September. All right. Course description. Basically, we're going to learn client-side scripting. Client-side scripting being JavaScript and not VB script. How many of you actually knew VB script parses in the browser? Cool. Have you ever tried to code it? in the browser? Yeah? Did it work okay? They say it's faster than JavaScript, but I don't know. Yeah. I don't want to make macros for Excel. That's really basically what it boils down to. We're going to learn standard client-side scripting. So in this class, we will not be touching jQuery at any point. Instead of the jQuery piece that they usually teach in this class, we're going to learn ES6. We're going to talk a bit about Babel and how to transpile our code and stuff like that, but that's way in the future. That being said, if you want to learn jQuery, it is not hard. It'll probably take you about 2 hours to learn it, maybe, if you're lucky. It's not a difficult thing to learn, but it's not really necessary. If you learn ES6, you'll learn a lot of the stuff they do as magic in jQuery. You will learn how to manipulate the standard DOM object. Don't worry if you don't know what the DOM is yet. We are going to talk about that a little bit today, and you will definitely be working with the DOM quite a bit going forward. And obviously, we're going to do some HTML and CSS. I am not a designer by really any means. I don't really like to spend tons of time doing design stuff. That being said, I am totally cool in your projects if you want to use material or a theme you find, or if you want to do Bootstrap, right? I'm totally cool with that. Don't worry about design and stuff so much. So we're not going to be doing any CSS or HTML stuff in this class. Yeah, we're not doing any CSS or HTML. Let's see. So resources. There's no textbook in this class because I don't believe in making people pay $200 for a textbook that's out of date in like 4 months. So there's no textbook in this class. Your textbook will be MDN, the Mozilla Developer Network, right? That's your like first point of action when you're trying to figure out something. You should be going to MDN. Your second stop should be contacting me on Slack, right? Or talking to your classmates, obviously. Your other resources are GitHub. I will push our code every week to GitHub, and the link is right there. And then YouTube, obviously the recordings, right? So you can go back and listen to the recordings and see if you can figure out whatever it is, okay? That's my instructor details, my email address, and the Slack invite. Because I work extremely part-time, I'm only here Tuesday and Thursdays after class. So if you need help with anything and you want to contact, you need like an appointment, make sure you make one with me and I'll stay afterwards after 4 and we can go over what it is that you need to go through. That's the wrong time. After 7. Should be after 7, not after 4. I'll change that and reload. All right, evaluation. This was originally 10 labs. I've reduced it because I don't like marking tons of stuff and you guys don't like doing tons of stuff. So I reduced it to 1 to 4 labs. They'll be done every 3 weeks. Every 3 weeks there'll be a new lab. It'll be expected to be done by the following week. There is 1 to 10 quizzes. They're worth 1%. They will never exceed 10 questions. They shouldn't take you longer than like 2 minutes, but it adds up. The 10 quizzes will add up to 10% of your grade. There will be 12 in total, so you kind of have 2 gimmies, right? There'll be 2 assignments. I'm not calling them projects. I'm calling them assignments. They'll be worth 20% each. And then your midterm and your final. Now, unfortunately, due to cheating and stuff like that, the college has decided to raise the amount of evaluations to 50% of your total grade, which is pretty hefty. So I'm trying to break it down in a way that it's not too bad. Hopefully that works. If you look below that, you'll see the schedule activities. It breaks it down into weeks. The last 3 that you see here, APIs in the bomb DOM, APIs on the server, and multimedia APIs, may be flipped out with Phaser, depending on how we're progressing. Yeah.
How are tests assessed? Are they practical or written? Or?
Usually I do both. Usually I do a practical and a written. The practicals, they look almost like today's thing that we're going to be working on, where I literally tell you what I want you to do in a comment, and then you write your code directly below it. So they go pretty quick. I have tried open-ended practicals with logic problems, and I can't be here for 4 hours or 5 hours waiting for the test to end because it just drives me nuts. So I've switched over to just commented code blocks, and you just write out the code block. That's it. Yeah. Other than that, that's it. Any questions about any of this stuff? No? Yeah, mate.
When do the quizzes expire?
Never. Yeah. So you have all 14 weeks to complete the quizzes. They're on your own. There's like a required reading block. To be honest with you, though, it's not trick questions. It's not like you had to read the reading in order to answer the question. Not by any means. They're just common sense JavaScript questions. You just read the question and answer it. So, yeah. Okay. Let's move to the next piece here. That's the lesson plan builder. Nope, kill that, kill that. All right, where you find your stuff. All right, under weekly learning is where most things will be. The quizzes will be under weekly learning. All of the information for that week will be under weekly learning, and any resources you may require. I would like it if you could go to resources. Out of curiosity, how many of you are already coding with something like brackets, Visual Studio Code, or even Visual Studio? Yeah? Okay. So you can use Visual Studio to do JavaScript. You can download the module for it. I know, if you want to really hit it with an 8 gig IDE, go nuts. Those of you that want to run a little leaner, Visual Studio Code seems to be the one that most people are going into. I use Sublime. I just like it. I try every so often a new IDE, and it drives me batshit, and so I come back to Sublime. Just tends to be what I do. I have all the packages that I like to use, so that's what I tend to use. So yeah, if you don't have an IDE for web development, or you're unsure about the IDE that you have, whether it will do JavaScript, which most of them should, I can't really think of any that wouldn't, then download the Visual Studio Code while we're doing this whole talk. All right. Also in there you will find links to different things such as my GitHub, the YouTube, and the Mozilla Developer Network. In addition to that, you'll also find a link to Fun Functions. The guy is hilarious. It's worthwhile watching, and he takes JavaScript to like the next level. So it's worthwhile watching him. He's really, really funny, actually. I like him. All right. Weekly learning, week 1 is where you'll find everything. I don't know if we'll get through all of this today. I'd like to, but I doubt it. I have a tendency to over-prepare and then have to under-deliver because I go way too much, way too over. All right. We have like a 20-minute video to watch, but I think I'm going to skip that. All right, let's do the next slide deck. And then we'll take a well-deserved break after that. There we go. Actually, before we do that, let's do something a little bit more interactive. Under the week 1, you'll see a link there that says, how comfortable are you with JavaScript? Go ahead and click that link. Somebody's already answered it. And then go ahead and give an answer. You should see it'll update automatically. This is actually powered using Rails UJS. In Rails, Rails has like the UJS works almost like jQuery. It's very close to jQuery. But basically what happens is as you respond, it immediately updates. Basically as if it's live. I'll even zoom in a little bit so you can see it a little better. Yeah.
It's not going to the next question.
It's not going to the link?
It's not going to the next question after.
No, there is no next question. It's just the one question. That's it. You can change your answer live and it will just update it. So that's cool. How many of you can actually manipulate the DOM well? Just out of curiosity. Awesome. Using jQuery or vanilla? Vanilla? Awesome. That's insightful. No masters yet, eh? You know what? I wouldn't even call myself a master. I feel like there's like a certain level of JavaScript guru that reaches that level, and I'm not quite there. I would say I'm definitely in the I can manipulate the DOM well factor, for sure. All right, that's cool. That's insightful. So about 55% of you. So based on that, we should hopefully get through the course pretty quickly, and then we can do some fun stuff with Phaser, which would be really, really nice. All right, let's go to the slide deck then real fast. So I don't know how relevant this will be because so many of you know so much already. Introducing JavaScript with my little tagline. Asynchronicity is a tough word to spell. It's also a tough word to say when you're drunk. JavaScript is not Java. That is rule number 1. JavaScript is not Java. However, many people don't realize it's actually inspired by it. The syntax was inspired by it. It's made by this wonderful fellow, Brendan Eich. I want to say his name is. It might be Eich. I might be pronouncing it completely wrong. He worked for Netscape. None of you are old enough to remember Netscape, doubtfully. Does anybody remember Netscape? Oh, you used it. Okay, so then you're definitely old enough to. Oh, wow, yeah, okay. Yeah, Netscape was awesome. I liked Netscape way back in the day. It was a pretty cool browser. However, I do love Chrome and I love Firefox. IE can die in a fire. He co-founded Mozilla, created JavaScript. He based it on the Java syntax because he loved the dot syntax. So that's about where the familiarities with Java end. The dot syntax that's it. After that, it's its own thing. It's its own beast. He wrote the prototype in 10 days. That is a fast time to write a language. 10 days. Yeah. And it was originally called LiveScript. I don't know, that's kind of cool. Fun facts, right? JavaScript is a loose language. It definitely gets around. It's loosely typed, right? You guys have worked in Java. You've worked in, have you done C#? Objective-C, Swift, any of those other ones? Yeah, so they're all strict languages, right? They all have types. They all have classes and object-oriented and stuff. JavaScript is an object-based language for sure. But it is not class-inherited. It's prototypal inheritance, which we'll get into more later on in the future. However, ES6 has definitely introduced classes for us to give people class inheritance. Some people are of two minds on whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing. It casts automatically, sometimes. Sometimes it casts automatically. If we do 5 plus string 5, we get 55. Okay, that makes sense, right? That's how it kind of work in other languages. However, if we do 5 times string 5, we get 25. So it actually casts the 5 over to an integer, and you wind up with what you expect. So you need to be cautious. Because of the automatic casting, and because it's not completely 100% predictable, you need to be cautious that you're trying to work with the data as you're working with it. There is a transpile, like a preprocessor language for JavaScript called TypeScript, which does introduce more strict regulations and rules around JavaScript. So that's always something in the future if you're ever looking to expand yourself. There's variables, there's properties, parameters, functions, and methods. None of them have to be data typed, okay? And yeah, that's what I already said. TypeScript is preprocessing language that provides static typing. JavaScript can be written in the browser. There's this handy little thing called a console. How many of you are familiar with the console? Yeah, that thing is fantastic, especially when you're trying to do a little bit of debugging and you just need to write something out stupid quick. The console is a fantastic place to do that in. We will definitely be exploring the console. However, each browser has its own engine, right? The engine that actually powers JavaScript is different depending on the browser you're looking at. So in Chrome, we have the V8 engine. Awesome engine. Compiles down to C++. Fantastically stupid fast, right? Very, very quick engine. Very, very good. Safari is catching up, though, recently, I read. Their Nitro engine is becoming on par, if not a little bit quicker, depending on what they're trying to do. Powers Node.js and MongoDB, or it did. It changed recently since version 3.2. MongoDB is now using SpiderMonkey, which is Mozilla's. It existed since 2008, and like I said, compiles directly to machine code, making it stupid, stupid fast. Firefox SpiderMonkey, written in C and C++, first JavaScript engine that existed. Powers GNOME Desktop, which is a Linux distro flavor. Powers MongoDB as of version 3.2. How many of you played with Mongo? Yeah, some of you? Yeah, cool. Safari Nitro. I mean, Safari tries, right? Tries. It's not terrible. I mean, it's not IE, right? So it's not terrible. Comes on your iPhone, right? So you use it there. Written by Apple for macOS applications. and currently compiles directly into native machine code. However, it is still not nearly as fast as Chrome or SpiderMonkey. It is getting better. There's a fun chart here that tells you which one is the fastest. Chrome is currently leading, and then it goes to Firefox and then Safari. That being said, it doesn't freaking matter. It doesn't matter because at the end of the day, the user is always the important one, love him or hate him, right? As most programmers do hate the user because the user does dumb things, right? They always do dumb things. Like, my application wasn't meant to run like that. Why are you doing that? Right? But it tells us that it's usually our fault and we need to fix whatever it is. The almighty user. They define accessibility. They establish their audience, right? You know, when Kim Kardashian picks up her phone and says, I'm going to use Slack today. Yeah, there's like 2.5 million people that all of a sudden jump onto Slack, right? They define the audience. They declare popularity. It doesn't matter how crappy the app is or how crappy the thing is. They're the ones that make it popular. They determine usability because they will tell you when something doesn't work. They will tell you, and they will tell you often. Or they won't tell you at all. They'll just post it to Instagram, right? They control environment, right? They have total control over the actual environment that's using, because if they're using iPhone and you're building your application strictly for Android, you're missing a huge target market, right? So you need to make sure you kind of feel out what the environments are that you want to actually code for. It's like IE, right? We all hate IE. I mean, IE, what's it good for? Downloading Chrome, right? But the problem is with IE is there's a huge market of people that get their computers and don't have a clue what to do after that, right? So that's their browser. It's not a huge market. It's a good enough market that it can impact you, right? So we have to make sure it works on IE, regretfully. JavaScript gives us client-side powers. That's how you spell dun-da-da-da, incidentally. So you can store information. You can store information on the client's browser. You can store it through local storage. You can do it through cookies. You can do it by actually posting information to a server API, right? However, you can unreliably maintain state. Now, you emphasize the word unreliably maintain state with JavaScript. The reason why I say it's unreliable is because the client is stateless. While you can store things in local storage and in cookies, you can't guarantee that person doesn't have cookies blocked. You can't guarantee they don't have something that's stopping local storage writing, stuff like that. Not like the server, the thing that you control, right? So, but most people aren't smart enough to know how to do that. And the guy that's doing that, he's not having a great web experience, right? So at the end of the day, you don't necessarily need to care. So maybe unreliably shouldn't be as big as maintain state. It should be a little bit smaller, right? You can manipulate the DOM, the document object model, the web page. You can target certain things on the web page and do some cool stuff. And I'm not talking like CSS stuff. I'm not talking like presentations. You know, turn the body pink, right? No. We can take shit and move it around and do some cool stuff with the stuff that's on the page. You guys didn't have Scott, but I'm sure Jessica probably emphasized the same thing. You know, you have these three structures, right? You have HTML, which is like the foundation of your house. It's the sticks that build the whole building, right? That's the thing you need. It's your structure. It's your semantic structure, right? Because that's the thing that describes what's going on. That structure is your DOM. It's describing what's happening in this thing called a document, right? CSS, that's the paint on the walls, right? It's the window trimmings and stuff like that. JavaScript, that's your home theater entertainment system. That's the functionality. That's the thing doing the cool things, right? That's the thing that brings down the disco ball and allows the mood lighting. That is JavaScript. That's where JavaScript comes in. However, JavaScript, you know, now with Node and everything else, JavaScript's a lot more than just cool animations, right? It does so much more cool things. Allows you to respond to user events, right? User clicks a button, you got that. You know they did that, right? User moves their mouse, you know they did that. Not only do you know you did that, you know exactly what they're looking at, right? You know exactly where their mouse is pointing. You have access to their microphone, if they allow it. You have access to their camera, again, if they allow it. You have access to a lot of different things that the user does through user events, right? And we're going to definitely look at event binding, right? We're going to do that quite extensively. We have user browser APIs. A lot of people confuse APIs with the Twitter API, the Facebook API. No. APIs are application program interface. Basically, it's like working with a code library, right? They give you a code library that you now have access to work with. So when you actually download a library and install it and work with that library, you're working with an API, same thing, right? Most people confuse this with REST APIs. REST is what you're thinking about. REST is where we actually create a fetch command and we go and grab some content back from an application programming interface that's stored on a server somewhere else. That's what that is. So user browser APIs, these are APIs that are built into the browser themselves. Standard JavaScript library would be one of them. ES whatever, any ES that you're using. Because the thing about ES 5, 6, and now we're into 7 and 8, right? It's the browser that has to support that standard, right? It's the browser that allows us access to those libraries. Geolocation, right? We can totally find out where this browser is currently located, right? Providing they allow us, and they say okay. That being said, sometimes you can do it by the IP address. Text-to-speech, which is cool because everybody wants their computer talking to them in a creepy computer voice, right? Generating SVG, 2D and 3D graphics through Canvas and WebGL, right? Like, did you guys get to play with OpenGL? Anybody played with OpenGL? No? Okay, so WebGL is, it's a specification basically that allows you to be able to, with the browser, draw things to the video card. So you send information to the video card and then you can produce animations or graphics or games even, like full out games in the browser by sending that information off to the video card. Audio and video, right? And then notifications, like push notifications and stuff like that. In fact, notifications fills into this services thing that the browsers are now starting to support. If we get time, we might look at services. If not, you will likely get to do that in your MeanStack class. You'll take a look a little bit more in depth into services, which allows you to do things like push notifications and stuff like that, which is kind of cool. User third-party APIs, right? Like REST APIs, Google Maps, social media, merchant APIs, shipping APIs, all the CDNs that you can have access to, such as Phaser, P5, jQuery, Bootstrap, React, all of those, right? I leave you with this. JavaScript is an interpretive, single-threaded, event-based, asynchronous, non-blocking, callback-driven language. That is a mouthful. That is one hell of a mouthful. And we're going to learn what each of these things means, right? Like interpretive, for example. You guys have worked in compiled languages. JavaScript is not a compiled language. It's an interpretive language, which means it starts at the top of the file, and it reads till it gets to the bottom of the file, which means anything can happen depending on how the code is changed. Single-threaded. Single-threaded is cool because this thing is asynchronous, yet it's single-threaded, which is kind of cool. Single-threaded means that we're using one pipeline to send all of our information through one concurrent connection to do everything we want to do. However, because of asynchronicity and the event basing, we don't have to wait for other stuff to happen. You can access the site, I can access the site at the same time. As long as your thing is kind of done, it will go to my thing and do my thing while you're waiting on your third thing to be finished. That's the cool thing about event-based. Asynchronous, that's that part that I'm talking about. That's asynchronous. Synchronous means you do your thing, I wait. Then I do my thing, then you wait. That's what usually happens. With asynchronous, we don't have to. We can do it together. We can do it at the same time. In other languages like PHP or Ruby or things like that, you need multi-threading to be able to support that type of stuff, right? With JavaScript, you don't. It is single-threaded. It is non-blocking. Non-blocking, again, that means the same kind of thing as what we're promoting with asynchronous. Non-blocking means I don't have to wait. We do it at the same time. Nobody has to wait. And it's callback driven. We're going to look at callbacks. Have you guys done callbacks in any of your other languages? Yeah, that's what I find. That's a funny thing because you can do callbacks in almost any language. Like, really, you can do callbacks in every language, pretty much that I can think of. I don't see why you can't. You can do it in C++, so you sure as hell can do it in Java. I'm positive you can do it in Java. Callbacks are fantastic. Callbacks are fun because callbacks allow you to kind of I would say they're probably one of the most important things to understand when you're working with asynchronicity, because that's the thing, you never know when something's going to happen. So you want to be able to kind of plan that out. When this event occurs, do this thing, right? That's what callbacks will allow us to do. Don't feel bad if you don't know what a callback is. We are definitely going to look into it, and we're going to talk about callbacks quite extensively. All right? Callbacks. Have you guys done lambdas? Yeah, lambdas are callbacks. Same kind of thing. So, all right, cool. We powered through that. Who needs a coffee or a drink or something? Yeah? Okay, let's take a 15-minute break. Go get your coffee or your drink. And then we're done with stupid slide decks. Hey.
Going back to the slide that had the fives,
Yep.
it actually makes sense when you think about it.
The fives.
Yeah. Because it would be automatically assigning
Hang on 1 second just to... All right, I guess we'll get started again. Okay, if you haven't already done it, if you go to the week 1 lessons and download the Introducing JavaScript starter files. That's what I need you to do. So you can just click on them, save them to wherever you're going to save them to. Oh, I'll throw them on my desktop. Why not? All right. They should download pretty quick. It's only like 2 megs worth of files. I don't even know why it's that big, actually. Once you have them, I'd like you to open them up in your IDE. So whatever IDE happens to be that you're using. Like I said, I use Sublime, which looks like this. But you're welcome to use Yaml.
What packages, if any, would we need for Sublime if we want to use that for JavaScript?
You don't need any packages, but if you're going to use any, let me see which ones I actually have. I can never remember how to look it up. Browse packages. I have in mine that you would need Babel, maybe. I don't even know if I have a linter. I only use Babel. That's like the only JavaScript, and Pretty JSON are the only 2 packages I use for that. So you don't really need any. Sublime supports JavaScript right out of the gate. Same with HTML and same with CSS. It's made to do those right out of the gate. All right, so open up your project file inside your IDE. You should be able to open up a whole folder directly into the IDE. If you can't, I recommend finding another IDE. I'm going to pull open the whole starter project here. And I'll zoom in nicely. I'm going to put it on the right, my browser on the left. Or sorry, let's reverse those. And then your left and right. Okay. Once you have those project files open, if you want to click another tab, so you have another tab inside your browser, go to File and Open File. Navigate to where those files are. So mine were on my desktop. Started producing app. Click on the index.html file and click Open, and it should open up inside your browser. This is the wrong file. Yeah.
I just have it where my browser automatically opens HTML files.
Oh, so if you open the folder, it immediately opens the index.html? Yeah. That's totally fine. This is not the correct. This is wrong. What to do? Let me just double check and make sure I didn't screw up and use the wrong one. Oh, it looks like the right one. All right, it's the correct one. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to do some modifications to it. Just a little bit of a recap for your days with HTML. We need to attach our style sheet, which is an external style sheet, right? And the way we do that, right here where it says the comment, we're going to put it right below it. Can anybody not see this IDE? Like, is it big enough or does it need to be increased? Increased? Better or a bit more? That's good? All right. I'm going to actually move this over just slightly and pull this up so that way it completes the line. All right, so we're going to use the link tag, which takes the rel attribute, style sheet, CSS, media is screen, and then the href, which points to where the source is that we're trying to load in as our style sheet, which will be called styles.css. And then because it's HTML5, we don't have to do the slash closing bracket. We can just do the closing bracket. And if you did that correctly and you click refresh in your browser, you should see my fancy styling. Now, loading in external style sheets, like I said, you guys did that in your HTML class in probably 2 semesters ago or a semester ago or so. That's easy, right? But we can do the same thing with JavaScript. We actually have 2 choices of how we want to code out our JavaScript. One, we can code our JavaScript inline inside this file, which I will show you exactly where we can do that. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see the comment that says add the external JavaScript file. Underneath that, all we need to actually code JavaScript directly in this page is a script tag and a closing script tag. That's it. Everything we put between these 2 tags will actually parse in the browser as JavaScript, which is pretty cool. And you remember I said to you earlier, like 20 minutes ago or so, that we can actually code right directly in the console, right directly inside the browser. And we can actually put information into that console as well. We can access the browser's stream buffer, basically, and feed information directly into that stream buffer and output it through the console. And the way we do that, anytime we want to output to the console, we use the console command. We access its .log method. And then it takes a string as an argument, whatever we want to write in there. Doesn't even have to be a string, actually. It can be anything you want in there. But we're going to put a string in there. Say, the traditional hello world, right? And then ES, we had to end all of our statements with a semicolon. And we're going to do that currently just so we understand the habit of it, but it is optional now. We don't actually have to use a semicolon anymore. But I find it kind of makes things definitive for people. It's a little easier for them to see exactly what we're doing. So now, obviously, if we go over to the browser and we hit refresh, nothing's happening. We don't see anything. We actually need to pull open the console, and there's a few different ways to do that depending on the browser that you're using. If you're using Chrome, you can choose to right-click and hit inspect and then go through that process. You can go to the developer tools, which is under View, Developer, and the JavaScript console is right there. There's a few different ways. I'm going to right-click and choose inspect. And right now it's loading up beside. I'm actually going to move mine. I click these 3 dots and I can move it to the bottom of the screen. And then you'll notice there's these tabs if you're using Chrome. And one of them says console, and you can click on console. I'm going to increase the font size there. And you can see our console is logging out the hello world that I typed into the console log. How many of you using Chrome? How many of you using Firefox? Do you have any difficulty finding your console in Firefox? No, it should be pretty easy. Anybody using Safari? Cool. Awesome. Anybody using IE? Good.
I'm using Opera.
Opera? That's fine. If you can use Opera, then you already know where your damn console is. Yeah. That's totally fine. All right, so we can continually write things to the console, right? Console.log. I am sick of the console. Click refresh over here, and we can see in there the second piece. I'm just going to get rid of these warnings that keep showing up so that it's not so convoluted. And that's fine, but we're using JavaScript and we want to manipulate the actual HTML on the page, right? We want to manipulate the DOM. Printing out the console is boring. However, it is important to understand it exists because it works out great for you when you're trying to do debugging, right? Console is fantastic for doing any debugging. But we want to manipulate the stuff above here. So we'll keep our console open just in case we have any errors so we can quickly solve whatever those errors will be. Because when you have errors in your JavaScript, it will actually show up in the console as well. So for example, if I tried a third console.log, and maybe I said .logs instead of .log. And then refresh. You'll notice that the console actually spits out an error message telling us what is wrong. Uncaught type error, console.logs is not a function. So it's telling us the method we're trying to access, .logs, is not a function, right? So we've obviously made a syntax error, okay? So that's fine, but the thing is, like with CSS, one of the first things you learn, one of the beginning parts you learn in CSS is get it out of the HTML page, right? Put it in its own document, put it in its own file. And the same thing goes for JavaScript. We don't want to keep our JavaScript in line with the rest of our HTML. It doesn't belong in there. We want to move it out to its own file. And we can do that quite easily. All we have to do is get rid of all this stuff that's currently sitting in here. Bring the closing script tag right up beside the other script tag. And then we give the script tag an attribute, right? You guys know what attributes are. You learned about that with an HTML tag. You have attributes. Rel, type, media, and href are all attributes of the link tag. Name, content is attributes of the meta tag, right? So script has an attribute called source. Just like the image tag. Image has a source tag as well, right? And in there is where we actually include our file. That's where we tell it where the file is. And I've made it nice and convenient. The file is sitting right in the root of our directory. So all we have to type in there is main.js and save it. Okay? And then we'll refresh our screen and nothing, right? Because we haven't actually typed out anything into main.js, so it's not doing anything currently. All right? Everybody good? Nobody with errors yet? Nice. Okay. What's that? Just warnings? Yeah. You can actually get rid of the warnings under this custom levels section. If you click it, you can turn them off, right? You can tell it you only want verbose errors, right? Or danger errors, or whatever it's called. What's it called? Errors. You can tell it you want errors. All right, so let's open up the main.js file, because we are done in the index file. We're not going to do anything else in the index file. So let's open up our main.js file. Increase the font size a little bit, just so it's a little easier to see. I don't think I have anything that will run off screen. I have one thing that will run off screen. All right, so obviously with every language, one of the biggest things that you have to learn is the syntax of that language, right? And just like any language you guys have worked in, JavaScript has loops, it has variables, it has functions, it has objects. Actually, most things in JavaScript are objects. It has properties and methods and other structures that you guys are used to in your languages. You just need to learn how to say those things in JavaScript, right? Just like if you learn English and you want to learn, I don't know, maybe French, right? All you need to do to say hello to somebody who speaks French is learn the syntax of how to say hello. It's no different with JavaScript. If you want to do things you've done in Java or any other language, you just need to learn the structure or the syntax for that in JavaScript. And then asynchronicity. And then you'll be good to go. But based on that, there's a few things that are very common that we want to know. One is how to make a comment. Now, this is a bit redundant because we already have comments there. Those are all single line comments. To make a single line comment, incidentally, my IDE automatically puts them in. To make a single line comment, it's 2 forward slashes, and then whatever you want to write after that point. As long as you don't break the line or create a new line character, it will all be within that comment, right? So you can type out whatever you want. Hello, I'm a single line comment. So that's easy, but quite often we have a lot to say, right? Maybe you want to put some details about yourself on your page in a comment box so that people know that it's your library, right? Or maybe you have something to really define because it's really convoluted and you want to explain exactly what it's doing. If you want to do that, then obviously you're going to want to be able to make a multi-line comment. Multi-line comments inside JavaScript look like multi-line comments inside CSS. I think PHP's multi-line comments are the same. Ruby's are not. Ruby's are a bit different, but yeah. It's asterisk. In C++, it's the same. It's / asterisk, followed by another asterisk and a / as the end closer. And then in here, you can type in whatever you want. I'm a multi-line comment. So all the activities I do will be broken down like this into step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you are welcome to just power through them if you already know some of the information. What I recommend to people who already kind of know how to do this, challenge yourself by doing something a little different, right? Take that opportunity that you already have time, that you have this available time to do something else, and use it to challenge yourself to further your knowledge in JavaScript, right? I find that's one of the biggest issues when it comes to school, is finding time to just do your own stuff, to learn some new stuff, right? You never really have time. You just wind up learning what I tell you to learn. That's why I tend to do assignments a little open-ended, which gives you guys a chance to actually challenge yourself and do something different, okay? Anyways, all right, so step 3 and 4. Step 3, we're going to declare a variable. And then step 4, we're actually going to reach into the document and we're going to grab one of the nodes from the document. Now, a node in JavaScript, a node is an element sitting on the page. You can think of a tag. A tag is a node. Anything the tag is wrapping is a node, right? And we can actually go and grab that node and bring it back. And then we have access to that node and its contents and any other properties about that node. We can do whatever we want with it. So the first thing we're going to do is define the variable. And in JavaScript, we tend to use var as a modifier, right? Var basically says, hey, take this variable and make sure it's within the functional scope that I'm currently in. Now, in JavaScript, it's kind of weird, right? Because you guys have done some cool things with like Java and stuff like that, right? Now, when you guys do Java, you have a main function, correct? In JavaScript, you don't have a main function. You don't see it. It's there. You just don't see it. So when we define var, var is globally defined within that main function right now. If we don't put var and we just write out a variable, that becomes global. Like it's global outside of everything. It is available everywhere within our application. There's nowhere that it doesn't have scope, okay? But we're going to functional scope ourselves to var. In JavaScript, when we define a variable, the common practice for the case that we use is camel case, which is starts with a lowercase letter, and then every word thereafter tends to be capital. It doesn't matter, though. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You can use underscores. You basically have to follow normal variable naming practices, right? So don't begin it with a number. Don't use a keyword. No dashes, stuff like that. No spaces, things like that, right? But general practice, you'll notice if you pull open a JavaScript library, it looks like this. It's all camel case. Every variable named is a camel case. All right, so we're going to do var my name. And we have a few options. We can finish it right there, right? You guys have done variable declarations, right? In Java, where you declare the variable before you actually create any assignment to it. You can do that in JavaScript. You can declare the variable and then assign it later. You can't do that in PHP. It's a shit language, but you can't do it in PHP. You can't do it in Ruby. There's a lot of interpretive languages that don't allow that, but JavaScript does. JavaScript allows you to write it without instantiating it, and then you can instantiate it and initialize it afterwards. So you can do my name equals, and then give it a value if you wanted to. So I could write Sean. Okay, like so, right? So now I have my variable symbol name, right? And then I have my value. My value is a string. That's what the current value of my name is, right? And if I want to see that, what's the quick and dirty way to see that right now? Yeah, console.log. Console.log, and we just pass it my name. We pass it the variable, and then we just come over here and click refresh, and sure enough, Sean McKinnon appears in the console. But step 3 and step 4 currently don't say that. They don't say write in a string called your name. It says get the DOM element. So we're going to do that. We're going to go and get the DOM element. And instead of doing this multi-line kind of thing that we're doing, I'm going to back it up. And right after the var my name where I declare the variable, I'm going to go equals. I'm going to access the HTML document by typing in document. That's the HTML document. That's my page that I'm accessing. There's a bunch of these, by the way, document, window. There's a whole bunch of different ones that have other properties to them. And document is an object. And objects, you guys will remember from object-oriented programming, have methods, have properties. Document has a method on it called query selector. Query selector is a cool method. I really like it. Back before ES5, we had to do get element by ID. So if we wanted to grab an element off the page, one of the tags, we had to go find its ID and pull it back that way. If we wanted to do it by CSS, we had to do get element by class, if it was like that, or if we wanted to do it by a text node or anything like that, they had all these different ones. Query selector's like, nope, we don't need to do that anymore. Query selector says as long as you know the CSS selector, you can use a CSS selector to access any element on that page. Well, I want to get the H1, right? I want to access this on my page so that I can do something with it if I want to, right? So in order to access that, I know it's an H1, and there's a few ways I can do that. One, I can go look at my HTML structure on my page, and I see here that it's an H1, right? Or I can take advantage of the developer tools that I have available in my browser to go figure out what that tag is. I can right-click on the tag, I can choose to inspect it, and there we go. Helps if we can kind of see. You can see that it shows the structure of our HTML structure, and it shows which one I currently right-clicked on. Tells me it's an H1. Very easy way, nice way to be able to find what I'm looking for. If you guys ever do web development, trust me, that developer tool is hands down your best friend. It's the best tool you will ever have because it's the one that helps you along all the way. All right, so in here, in order to access that H1, I just need to give it a CSS selector. How would I access just the H1 using CSS? What would be my selector? Does anybody know? H1, yeah, exactly, just H1. Bam, I now have it. So just to make sure I have it, why don't we use our handy debugging console.log my name, and we'll refresh the page. And if you've got the node, you should see H1 introducing JavaScript H1. That tells you you have the node. Now, bizarrely enough, with the console, often when you output an object, and don't get me wrong, that is an object, right? Usually it will show you all the properties and methods available to that object, right? So you can actually see, what availability you have on that object. Things like .lang, things like .prototype stuff, all that type of stuff. Right now, at least we can tell that it's the node. All right, cool. So we're going to log the variable contents to the screen. So I kind of did this in the wrong spot. I'm just going to move it down a little bit. So you can copy and paste that under step 5, or just leave it where it is. Doesn't really matter. Step 6, change the text to read introducing full name. So your name, obviously, is what I mean there. So let's do this in 2 steps. Let's do var name, and we'll put Sean McKinnon in there. You put whatever your name is in there, right? Maybe we'll rename the one up here where we're doing the document selector, just because it feels a little bit confusing, right? What it's actually doing. We'll just retitle that to H1, right? Make sure you do it in the console log as well, so you don't wind up with a disconnected reference. Now, to replace the word JavaScript with Sean McKinnon, I'm actually just going to replace the entire row, make my life nice and easy. Oh, actually, it looks like I changed things, but well, we'll do it this way anyways. We'll do name.text content. And text content is a property that is on the name. Sorry, that's wrong. It's h1.textContent. My apologies. That's the element that we're accessing that we got up here on line 11. And .textContent is a property of it. It's actually a direct access to the text node that is currently a part of the H1 element. And don't worry if this all seems confusing and you're kind of like, I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. Because next week, we're going to do variables, strings, and operators. This is just kind of like, hey, let's get into JavaScript. Let's do something cool in JavaScript first, and then we'll, pull back and we'll do it a little slowly, right? All right, so in here, I'm going to do H1 text content, and yeah, let's just put name for now. That's totally fine. Just do name. And then obviously there's no change in our browser. So we have to go to our browser and click refresh. And if you did it correctly, introducing JavaScript should be entirely replaced with your name. Yeah?
The semicolons is optional?
What's that? The semicolons?
Yeah,
they're 100% optional now. Yeah. When I taught, so unfortunately, you guys are totally lucky because the mean stack class I taught last semester didn't get an introduction client-side scripting class. So they walked in day 1 into mean stack knowing no JavaScript, and we jumped in day 1 into model view controller in JavaScript. That's a nightmare. That is hard. So you guys, because of the train wreck that every instructor went through with that, you guys get introduced in JavaScript, which teaches you the foundations of JavaScript, which is kind of cool. But based on that class, the reason why I'm using semicolons is because they got mad about no semicolons. They're like, every language we touched so far uses semicolons. I don't know where my line ends. Well, I do. It's the new line character. That's where it ended, right? But yeah, so I use semicolons just to kind of keep it familiar, and then we're going to slowly get rid of them as we go along. All right? Okay, step 7. Change the history text to read a brief bio about you. Okay, so we know how to access an element now, right? how can I access the history text that's on this page here? What first do I need to do? I want to store it. So what's the first thing I'll need to store it? Any idea? Yeah. Yeah, I will need that, but I want to take what I get back from it and put it in something. Create a variable. Yeah, let's do that. So we'll do var my bio. And then as the gentleman said, document.query selector. And what is my selector? Yep, P. That's it. And that's because this is in a paragraph tag, right? Now, query selector. If I have more than one paragraph on the page, query selector will only return the first instance. So that's one downfall to it. Some people think, oh, well, I'll get every paragraph back. But that's unfortunately not what happens. You get the first instance of that paragraph on the page. If you want all the paragraphs on the page, you have to use a different method called query selector all. And it will return back an array of all the elements on the page that meet your CSS selector. All right, so cool. So now you can write your bio. So my bio. And what method do I use, or sorry, what property do I access to change the text in that paragraph? Text content, right. And you can use either double quotes or single quotes. It does not matter. At some point, we're actually going to take a look at backticks. We'll look at that next week. And you can type out your story. So I'm going to say it was a dark and stormy night on December, if I can spell right, there we go. I mean, you can type out my story if you want, but you should type out your own. I don't know if it was actually dark and stormy. I know Superman came out around then, the first Superman. It was a good year. All right. Change the color of the font for the H1. Sounds like a plan, Dan. All right, so we need to access the H1. How do I access the H1? We've already done it, right? We've already got it. What do I want to call? H1, right? I want to call my variable. And to change the styles, I'm actually going to access the style property, which is really nice and cool that it's just right there for me. And I want to access the text color. And what's cool is there's a property on style called color. So I can just call color. Spelt in the wonderful American way, C-O-L-O-R. And you can change it to whatever you want. I'm going to use dark red. You can use pink. You can go grab a hash color selector. Actually, there's a really cool site called flatuicolors.com. And they have color palettes from all over the world. You can click on the color palette that you want to choose and then just select one of the colors you want. So I'm going to actually choose this one, pomegranate. There we go. And I'm going to come back here and I'm going to change this out with pomegranate. There, now I'm using pomegranate. Now if I refresh, it's pomegranate. All right, so our next step, select the H2 and change it to have an underline using chaining. Well, we've kind of done chaining. Chaining is this, where I call a property or a method, and then I call another property or method directly afterwards, attached to the same thing. And the way chaining works is that I get the context from the beginning of my chain and it gets carried through. And then whatever change has happened to it carries to the next part of the chain. And you just keep chaining it through. You guys may have done that with classes before where you actually return the object back. That's how you perform chaining. You can do it in PHP or any language so much. Don't focus too much on it though. We'll talk about it a little bit more in depth later. All right, so now I want to access the H2. Thing is though, is I don't need a variable. I'm literally going to do this one thing. So I'm not going to store it in a variable. Instead, I'm just going to go document.query selector. h2. And if I want to change the style of something, we just access the style, right? Anybody want to take a guess at what property I need to access to add an underline? Text decoration. And now, because we can't do a hyphen, right? Because properties, just like variables, can't have hyphens in them. Instead, we do the camel case to access it. So text decoration. And then I just say what I want it to be equal to the value. So I'm going to say it's equal to underline. And if everything's cool, I refresh, I should see that history is underlined. So let's add some coolness to this, because like I said before, all we've done here, we could have did in a CSS file, right? We could have changed this manually and everything else, and that's not the power of JavaScript. The power of JavaScript is dynamics, right? The ability to dynamically modify something, to do things like animation and stuff like that. So we're going to do animation. It's not going to be nice and smooth, but it'll be animation. Of course, we could do it in CSS, right, with transitions and animations and stuff, but forget that. That defeats the purpose of this process. So we're going to create an array of names. So to create an array, we're going to store it in a variable. I'm going to call it names. Makes sense, right? It's a list of names. Might as well use the plural. And then I'm going to instantiate it with an actual list. I'm just going to assign it right off the bat. You can do var names equals new array, but that's convoluted. We're just going to define it right off the bat. So I'm going to write the man, the mystery. You can write whatever things you want to write. Sean McKinnon. Actually, I'm going to change that. I'm going to change Sean McKinnon to say the legend. That's better. It's my app. All right. Of course, I didn't write that in the right spot. I wrote it in my example, not up here. The legend. There we go. All right. Next, we need to create a counter so we can keep track of what's happening. So we're going to do var count equals 0. And then we're going to do some cool, crazy stuff that we're not going to totally explain what we're doing, just because it's a bit advanced. But by the time we're done, you'll fully understand what this thing is doing. Okay? The first thing we're going to do under the first comment, we're going to create what's called an interval. So we're going to do set interval. And I'm going to just take off that last parenthesis, and I'm going to pass it a callback function. I'm not sure how familiar you are with anonymous functions, but this is an anonymous function. Basically providing an anonymous function to call. Under the step 10c, replace the text for my name. I'm going to do my name dot text content, right? Remember that, equals names. And then I'm going to access the first element of my array. And you'll be happy to know that JavaScript is 0 indexed. So no weirdness like 1 indexed. Forget which language it is. It's not Python. Maybe it is Python that's 1 indexed. One of them is 1 indexed, which is bizarre, right? So instead of writing 0, I'm going to use my counter variable. PHP is 0. Ruby 0. Most of them are 0. I think it's Perl or Python. It's one of those two that is 1 indexed. All right, so step 10d, increment count if still less than the names array, right? So we'll do if count is less than names dot length.
Where are you putting the names?
The names, we wrote them up top on line 31.
Yeah, but where are you putting them?
What do you mean?
What's my name?
My name is that element up there. Oh yeah, you're completely correct. Yeah. Did that wrong, selected the wrong thing. We need to select the H1. Nice catch. That's what happens when you change your example on the fly. Yeah, sorry, it's the H1 that we need to select. And I got to stop changing it in the wrong screen. H1. There we go. Now it's changed properly. So we're going to replace the text in the H1 tag with that name, with these labels that we've created here. All right, so if count is less than names.length minus 1, we have to minus 1, right? Because names.length will actually return the length of the array. But the length of the array is 3, right? But we don't want to access the third element because it's empty. There's nothing there. It's undefined. So we want to access the second element. And the only way to access the second element is by subtracting 1 from the index, right? So we're going to subtract 1 from the index. And then in step 10, we need to close this whole thing out. So we're going to pass in the curly brace bracket so that we close out the function. Then we're going to give it another parameter because this whole function we just gave it is one of the arguments. The second argument we're going to give it is time in milliseconds. So we will give it 1500 milliseconds, which will be 1.5 seconds. Then we close out the method call with a closing parenthesis and then a semicolon. And if everything is working nice and neatly, what should happen is Sean McKinnon should change to the man, the mystery, the legend.
To increment the count.
Do I want to increment the count? Yes, we do. Oh, yeah, I didn't finish off my statement. Sorry. Here we go. Count plus equals 1. That's what we need. Need to move this up a bit there. Cool, so let's refresh. The man, the mystery, the legend. Now, what would we adjust if we wanted to make it longer than 1.5 seconds?
The delay there in milliseconds.
That's right, the delay that's down here, we can change that to however long you want it to be. So why don't we make it super fast? We'll just make it 500 milliseconds, just half a second, right? Click refresh, and it goes super, super quick. So that's our quick introduction to JavaScript. Very, very quick. It is 5:51? Yeah, 5:51. So why don't we take a 15-minute break and we'll come back. The next example we're going to do is we're going to build a word guessing game. Or sorry, a number guessing game. And we'll do that. Yeah. Scroll the top.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, we changed them over to H1. Yeah. No worries. Why don't we resume again and then we'll see if we can try to get it a little earlier. Okay, so if you want to go to the weekly lessons and download the number guessing starter files, download to wherever you want them to go. Throw away that zip file. Then once you have them downloaded, open them up in your IDE. There you go. You should have 3 files: index.html, the main.js, and the styles.css file. And then in your browser, go ahead and open up the file index file. And that's what you should see. This is the heading, guess a number between 1 and 100, a placeholder input field, and the button guess. In your IDE, go ahead and open up the HTML file, the index.html. And the first thing we're going to do is add that style sheet to our page. So let's go ahead and add that style sheet. It's link rel equals style sheet. Oops. Media equals screen. And href equals styles.css. And save it. And if you linked it up correctly, when you refresh your browser, you should see that, which looks quite a bit different than the basic HTML. Right now, it doesn't do anything. If you type in a number, click guess, it does nothing. No magic right now. We're going to hook the magic up. All right, so one thing we need to do right away is actually connect up our external JavaScript file. What is the name of the tag that we need to put down here? Script, yeah. And then what's the attribute that we're going to need in order to link it to our main.js file? SRC. I'm pretty sure it's called main.js. Yes, it is. And if we refresh, it still does nothing because we have no actual JavaScript in our main.js file. So now we're done with our index.html file. We're ready to dive into the main.js file and start stubbing out everything we need inside of it. So let's open up main.js. You're going to see a slew of steps there, not that many. Because you surprisingly don't need that many steps to make a number guessing game. You actually need very few. So first one we're going to do is we're going to need to grab the h1 and store it in a variable. And the reason we're going to do that is we're actually going to add like success messages and hints and stuff like that directly into our h1. So to grab the h1, oops, there we go. We're going to first create our variable. We'll call it h1. And then what do we need to, in order to grab the h1 element off the page? What is the object that we want to access? Document, yeah. And what is the method we want to use? Query selector. And what is our selector? h1. So that will access our h1 on the page. We can verify that by logging it out to the browser. So we can do console.log h1. Open up our console, and if we hit refresh, you should see your node there. Now, as pointed out by the gentleman over there, if you have Mozilla Firefox, it may just say h1 with a tiny little arrow beside it. When you click the arrow, it will actually show you all the properties and methods assigned to that node. So it's very handy when it comes to development. All right, cool. Next, we need to grab the input because the input is where we're actually going to allow the user to put the number, right? We want to be able to grab that information so that we can check and make sure it matches our number, right? To grab the input, we're going to do var input, and we only have one input on the actual in the actual document, so we'll just do document.querySelector input, and that will grab that selector, or that element. Now, something I like to do, I do like to pay a little attention to user experience. When I come to the screen and I type in my number, like so, and then I click guess, you'll notice that it loses focus, right? Which means that now, in order to change the number or do anything with the number, I need to click back into the input box to create any actual input. Plus, when I come to the screen, I don't believe it starts there. Yeah, you'll notice that you don't actually start inside the input box, right? It's kind of a crappy user experience. You want to start in here because that's the focal point, right? That's the point where you want the user to be able to interact. So we might as well start them there. So we're going to add focus to the actual element. Very simple. We just call input focus, and that's it. And the focus method basically just triggers a focus action to occur. So we wind up in the element that we need to be in. And we can see that work if we hit refresh. You'll notice that our cursor starts immediately inside the box. We're already where we need to be. We're not done grabbing elements off the page. The next element we need to grab off the page is the actual button. And the reason is the button isn't doing anything, right? They click the button, there's no event occurring. We want to grab that button and actually listen for an event. We want to listen to when the person actually clicks the button. So to grab the button, we're going to store it in a variable called button. And the element name is just button. So now we have the button. We're not doing anything with it yet. They can still click it. We're not actually listening to that event. We'll listen to that further down. Before we do that, we also need a variable to actually store the number of guesses, right? Because we're going to actually set a loss when they guess too many, right? It's 1 out of 100. That's quite a few guesses, right? But we're going to basically say after 10 guesses, you've lost. So let's create a variable to store how many guesses they've actually guessed. So we'll do var guess count, and we'll initialize it with a 0. Now we could create a variable with a hard-coded number in it, but I mean, what's the fun in that, right? If we know what the number is, then it's pretty easy to guess. And then if they want to play it again, we'd have to open the script, change the number, save it, reinitialize the browser, and let them guess again, right? That's stupid. So we're going to generate a random number because JavaScript gives us direct access to the math library. When you guys take C++, incidentally, that library doesn't exist until you add it. You don't get math. You don't get strings either. You don't get strings until you add them. That's the whole point. But anyways, in JavaScript, you get everything, baby. That's the way it works. So let's go ahead and create a variable called random num. Use the math library, which incidentally is called math. We're going to use the seal function. Anybody know what seal does? Right, exactly. It kind of rounds the number to the next number, whatever the next whole number is, right? So no fractions. So seal, we're going to call math again, and we're going to call the random function, and we're going to multiply it by 100. And the reason we're multiplying it by 100 is the random function, the values it returns are between 0 and 1. But you get a decimal. You get a decimal anywhere from 0 to 1. So because of that, you need to multiply it by 100 to turn it into a whole number. Otherwise, you have decimals. So that will give us 1, 2, whatever we have, right? So, sorry, that will just give us the random number between 1 and 100. Next, we need to add an event listener that will execute when the button is clicked. So let's do that. Button.add event listener. Okay, so event listener is a method that is available on any element that you actually grab on the page. You can actually attach an event listener to it. Events are anything from clicks, submits, focuses, blurs. There's tons of different things that can cause events. You can actually create custom events as well. You can trigger an event called Bob's event, and that becomes an event that you can trigger at a certain point in your application if you want to. That's the whole power of JavaScript, right? Everything's event-driven, right? We're entirely relying on events to be able to tell us what our next step is, what next is going to happen, okay? So the event we're going to listen to, there's a few events that just exist. One of them is click, so we can literally just write in click. So we're going to listen for the click event on that button. So when they click the button, we're going to do something. And what we're going to do is fire off a function. So we're going to use another one of those wonderful anonymous functions. And then just for now, I'm just going to get rid of these two closing pieces, the closing curly brace and the closing parenthesis, because we're going to add it to the bottom later on. Okay? So right now we've got our open. We have the event listener, which is listening for the click event. When the click event happens, it will fire off that callback function. That's how that works. All right. Step 6b, increment the guess count. So every time they guess, we're going to increment our guess count by 1, which will basically allow us to keep track of how many times they guessed. So guess count. And you can do ++ if you want to. Some people prefer plus equals, which basically says take this variable and what its current value is and immediately add 1 to it. Now we can provide a win condition. Because, I mean, what's the point in playing if you can't win? We just check to see what the input value is. So we're checking to see what this value is, right, inside the input box. We're going to see if it equals what? What do we want to know if it's equal to? What's that? Random num. Yeah, exactly. Want to know if it's equal to the random number that was generated. And then if it is, we're going to change the text of our H1, right? What property do I need to use in order to change it? Text content, yeah. And you can write whatever message you want.
Random num. So there's a typo.
Oh, right, that's random num. Which occurs after a weekend of bad choices. That's when you get random num. All right, h1.textContent. Now, something that's really cool, I showed you the plus equals here. You can actually do plus equals with strings as well. You can can't even talk, having a stroke. You can concatenate a string onto another string. That's totally easy. So we can use the plus equals again. And we're just going to give them a little bit of information. We're just going to say total guesses. So how many total guesses they actually had. Now, if I want to add a variable to this, I have two options. One, I can use backticks, which we'll take a look at next week, which allows us to do something called string interpolation. However, today we're going to not use backticks. So we'll have to use concatenation. So to concatenate the guess count, I'm going to do plus. Spell guess count correctly. There we go. And then I just want to close my bracket. I'm going to make this a little wider just because it's not that wide. There. Hopefully that's a little easier to see what's going on. And then if they win, I want to be done. I don't want to continue on to logic below that. Right? So in order to be done and get out of this whole event listener, the easiest way to do it is to just return. Return right directly in. I don't need to return false. I don't need to return true. I just need to return. That gets me out of it. So cool. They can win. They can also lose. We need to check the lose conditions. So the way we'll check the lose condition is if guess count equals 10. So if they've done 10 guesses, Then we'll change the H1 content, and we'll say you lose. And we might as well tell them what the correct number was, so they don't lose any sleep. Correct number was random num. And if they lose, again, I don't want to continue on to the next bit of code, so what do I need to do? Just return. Now this will just return out of that function, that anonymous function. That doesn't mean our application is done. We still have access to the application, any of the event bindings, anything we want to do. Because incidentally, this function only runs when we click. And it runs every time we click, right? Like it creates itself and does all these steps every single time we click. So we don't have to worry that if we return, our application is over, because it's not. All right, why don't we provide some hints? Because I mean, it's 1 to 100, right? That is that's a big range, right? So let's provide some hints. It basically says, hey, you're too high or you're too low, right? So the hint, let's do if input.value is greater than random num, then we'll do h1 text content is equal to too high. Otherwise, or else, h1.textContent is equal to too low. And we're not going to return from that because we want them to continue, right? We don't want to throw anything else. We could return from it. It doesn't really matter because as soon as they click the button, it does its thing. Now for that good user experience, every time they guess, we don't want them to have to highlight the number, delete it, and then type in the new number, right? That's a crappy experience. We want to remove the number and then reposition focus back into the box, allowing them to enter in a new number. Okay? So to do that, we're going to do input dot value, and we're just going to make it an empty thing. So inputs use dot value. Okay? That's how you actually set the value inside the input. You call dot value on it. When you're doing it to a node, like an element, you do it to, or sorry, like a text element, you have to do text content in order to change it. Calling text content on input, I believe, just returns an error because it's not a property that's available. Then, of course, we want to draw focus back to the input button, right? So we're going to do input.focus. That'll put it back there. And then we're done. But we need to do one last thing, or this whole thing will just blow up in our face. Yes, we need to close the brackets. The first bracket we need to close is the curly brace for the function. The second is the parentheses for the method. And then we semicolon. Now, if everything's good, the easiest way to do this to make sure we haven't made any errors is to open up our console, right? Because our console is going to show us if we have any problems, if anything has gone wrong. I'm just going to move my console down a bit. I never seem to grab. There we go. There. I'm going to click refresh. Cool. I just want to get rid of this console message that I have currently sitting on line 3, just so I have a more real estate inside the console there. Okay, cool. Now I'm ready to do my guess. All right, let's try, what's a number? Give me a number.
95.
95. Let's go 95. Guess. Too high. Let's go lower. 20. Too high. Ooh, okay, now we're getting somewhere. Go ahead, another number. 10. Too low. Well, it's between 10 and 20. 17?
17.
17. Too low. Narrowed it down a bit. So it's between 17 and 20.
18 or 19.
We're gonna go 18, I guess. And we got a 50-50 chance. We did it in 5 guesses. That's not too bad. All right. So there's other things we could add to this, right? We could add in, instead of just going too high, too low, you could do something like, did you guys ever do the thing where somebody's like, they'd hide your phone or they hide something on you? And they'd be like, warmer, warmer, cold, cold, cold. You could do that. So you need to kind of, with your logic, you need to be able to check between ranges, right? You could make it so that instead of just 1 to 100, that you could actually fill in any value, right? So instead of just 1 to 100, set a variable that you can then set to 1,000, 2,000, 20,000, whatever you want it to be, right? You can make it multiplayer. Make it so that 2 people can play, right? And then with JavaScript, with things like sockets and stuff like that, you could extend that even further and make it networkable. There's like no end to the number guessing game. Yeah.
So you said with ceiling that it rounds it, so it rounds it up?
It's always up to a whole number. Yeah. It doesn't round
Because
it.
there's also floor.
Floor goes down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Floor will take, so if you have 1.6, right, and then you put seal on it, it becomes 2. If you put floor on it, it becomes 1, right? Whereas round will actually take 1.6 and round it to 2, or round it to 1 if it was like 1.4, 1.5. 1.5 goes to 2, yeah. Anyways, that's it. That's all I have for you today. That being said, though, there is some reading. It says required. I recommend it. It's not required. Read this thing. So there's the JavaScript first steps in the Mozilla Developer Network, which gives you like almost that same number guessing game, basically. Only mine's a bit different. It's a little simpler. Theirs is a little bit more complex. They actually build functions, and then they use the functions to be able to do the different things. We're going to look at functions later, so I just wanted to keep it simple. And then the other 2 is what is JavaScript, a first splash, and then what went wrong, which teaches you a little bit about debugging. Then there's a quiz. The quiz has 8 questions. Very easy. Do it whenever you want. Doesn't matter. There's no time limit on the quiz between now and 14 weeks from now. I don't recommend stockpiling them all until 14 weeks from now, but there's no rush on it. There's no labs or anything like that. Your first lab will be in 2 more weeks. And that's it. Yeah, man. The reading, is it not available? Thank you. Oh, there we go. Should be available. Awesome. Have a good Thursday. I mean, there's nothing exciting about Thursdays. Also, this code, by the way, if you're looking for it, is sitting on GitHub. The GitHub link is under resources.
Yeah, same thing.